Hello, everyone. I just wanted to address some comments that I made on my show the other night that have become fodder for social media. Karen Reed's team is not distancing themselves from me, and I'm sure I'll be able to sit down with them and have a recorded discussion with them eventually. The only reason I even brought that up on my show was because people kept asking when I was going to have them on in light of Bob Alessi and David Unetti's appearances on other channels. I've always been straightforward about what's going on, so I answered the question truthfully. This has been perceived as me being bitter, but the truth is I was just answering a question that a lot of people were asking. Let me be very clear, though. Karen Reed and her team don't owe me anything. I didn't do this for accolades and thank yous or money. I did this because I love doing investigative journalism, and I've been doing this sort of work for 11 years now. I love digging into stories and reporting what the rest of the media isn't. I love uncovering corruption, exposing people who behave badly, and helping innocent people. It's a very satisfying line of work, and I'm lucky and blessed to be able to do it for a living. I wrote about the Karen Reed story because it was a story that wasn't being properly told by the media. I was shocked on April 17th, 2023, when I read all of the court filings and spent hours doing a deep dive. I published part 1 of the Canton cover-up series at 3:30 a.m. on April 18th, 2023, and I've never looked back. The story didn't take off because I sensationalized it. The story took off because the facts and the evidence were shocking. Like many of you, I have had no idea that our institutions could partake in something so transparently evil. My reporting and activism is not the reason Karen Reed is free. Dr. 𝗏𝗡, Dr. Rentschler, Dr. Russell, Dr. Wolf, Dr. 𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏, Lucky Loughran, and Nicholas Barros are the people most responsible for her freedom. It was their truthful testimony that caused the jury to realize that John O'Keefe wasn't hit by a car, and therefore Karen Reed did not kill him. You could argue that Hank Brennan, 𝗬𝗏𝗪𝒧𝒧𝒧𝒀𝗏, Judd Welcher, Kerry Roberts, Jennifer McCabe, and Kelly Deaver contributed to her acquittal more than anyone because of the way they behaved in front of the jury that proved that the Commonwealth wasn't being honest. Karen Reed is free because of her own investigating and the fine investigative work done by her lawyers and private investigator. That's not to say that I don't think I played a part in it. I certainly did, and my reporting supplemented theirs. I wasn't just annoying Chris Albert outside of his pizza shop. I was filing public records requests, speaking with other witnesses, and passing this information on to the defense when it was useful. I found things in my own investigation and gave that information to Karen and her team prior to publication. I reported that Jennifer McCabe was parked outside the Proctor's house on September 25th, 2023, which proved for the first time that there was a personal relationship between the two families. This information was used in court filings, and the two families could no longer lie in court about that. More than anything, my journalism and activism raised public awareness, and without that, none of this was possible. Not only did the crowds outside the courthouse lift Karen Reed's spirits, they also gave her the financial ability to properly defend herself. The Legal Defense Fund was an idea I suggested for Karen Reed, and I was one of the first people to fundraise for it on one of my earlier shows in May of 2023. We ended up raising over $1.1 million, which paid for the defense to fly, feed, and lodge all of these experts time and time again for pretrial hearings. The experts are the reason the jury acquitted Karen Reed, and every single person who donated to the Legal Defense Fund helped make that possible. There's no denying that the story has helped me professionally. Although I made a fine living with Turtleboy before the Karen Reed story, I've made a lot more money since writing about it, and my social media reach and online profile have grown exponentially as a result. But I never would have had the opportunity to do this if the Commonwealth didn't frame an innocent woman for murder. If they had dropped the charges after part 1 of the Canton cover-up series, then this story would have been a one and done, and most of you never would have heard about it. Instead, they decided to continue to frame Karen Reed with new planted evidence. They arrested me for asking questions of the people who were quite clearly hiding something, and they dragged Karen through 2 internationally televised trials. They chose to do that, not me. My newfound fame and monetary gain that came out with it was simply a side effect of their choices, not mine. I've spoken to Karen many times since she was acquitted, but I don't want to bother her too much because I'm sure she needs space. Think of what she just went through. 3.5 years of being framed and tortured by the most powerful people in the state, being defamed as a murderer, having every word she said taken out of context, and dealing with the constant anxiety of knowing that at the end of this, there was a chance that she could spend the rest of her life in jail, which would mentally and physically kill her parents. Although you can probably imagine what a horrible feeling that must be, you don't really understand it until you've lived it. 4 times I've stood in front of judges at the Commonwealth as they have sought to revoke my bail and put me in jail for 60 days over completely made up charges. 1 time they succeeded, but all 4 times were anxiety-inducing hell. Being away from my kids for 60 days was the worst punishment I ever could have imagined. Talking to them on the phone from jail, pretending I was away on business, and not being able to truthfully answer their question about when I was coming home was painful. Reuniting with them on February 23rd, 2024 was one of the greatest feelings in my life. I couldn't sleep that night as I looked at their pictures on the wall and promised myself I'd never be separated from them again. I thought I would never be happier when I got out of jail, but the truth is, I was never more scared. Just days after I was released, Paul O'Keefe and the McAlberts brought the woman who had lied about me and sent me to jail with them to a Karen Read hearing for the sole purpose of having me charged with violating a restraining order. It worked. I knew that 17 days later, I would be standing in front of a judge who would have the chance to revoke my bail again, this time for 120 days. Imagine feeling the joy of being reunited with your kids after 60 days away from them, only to immediately be faced with the process of being away from them for another 120 days. It was the biggest tease ever, and I didn't truly feel free until the bail revocation was denied on March 14th, 2024. After that, they tried to have my bail revoked 2 more times, once over window intimidation and another over comments I made on my show about what I hoped would happen to the corrupt cop who knowingly participated in framing me. The feeling of standing in front of a judge, knowing that he has the ability to cause you the worst pain imaginable by taking you away from your kids again, is mental hell. I can't tell you the amount of nightmares I've had about going back to jail. It's on my mind constantly and will be as long as I'm out on bail. And these bad faith, corrupt law enforcement officials have the ability to lie and file motions that would take away my freedom. Too many times to count, I've woken up in the middle of the night kicking and screaming as I was in the middle of a horrible dream about being forced back to jail. It's traumatic, and I deeply underestimated what it would be like when I got out of jail last February. I'm not telling you this to feel bad for me. I'm telling you this because I know what Karen Read is going through, as only someone who has lived it can truly know. I see a therapist regularly, and I highly doubt Karen has time to. When what she's been through isn't normal. The smiles you see on TV and the confidence she exudes in public are her way of putting on a strong front. But she is human, and she knew that at the end of this, if she was convicted, that she would be the only one who has to go to the hellhole known as state prison. Although we're all happy for Karen Read, keep in mind that the emotion she's feeling right now might be even worse than what she was feeling before she was acquitted. What she has lived through the past few years has been news and entertainment for us, but for her, it's been traumatic, and she may not even realize it until now. I don't know if she's having nightmares and random feelings of severe depression like I was after getting out of jail, but it would be very normal if she was. Life will never be the same for her after this. As for interviewing her, I've had many discussions with her over the last 2.5 years about being the first to interview her, but she never promised me that. It was always something I hoped for, but it wasn't something I thought I was entitled to. The fact of the matter is that she has lost everything as a result of this, including her job, her car, and her house. She has to rebuild her life again, which means she has to make money. As much as I would be honored to interview her first, the fact of the matter is that there is likely a bidding war going on right now for that honor. I'm just a guy with an online news website, and I can't compete with what others would offer her. I don't have hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. I've discussed this with her, and I think she should make as much money as she can off of this. She assured me that after the first interview, she'd be happy to sit down with me. So no, Karen Read and her team are not distancing themselves from me because they're worried about new charges or because I use foul language that they don't want to be associated with. In fact, I was the second person Alan Jackson called after his wife on the day that Karen Read was acquitted. I was invited out to dinner with all of them that night. It is purely a business decision for them now, which I not only completely respect, but I think they would be crazy and stupid to blow that type of financial opportunity just to throw me a bone. Everything I did with this story was for justice for John O'Keefe. I might get a little carried away sometimes, and I definitely use foul language that my mother wouldn't like. But the fact of the matter is that an innocent man was murdered inside Brian Albert's house, and the people who did it not only got away with their crimes, but framed an innocent woman for it. If this doesn't sufficiently outrage you to the point where you use foul language or want to get up in people's faces and ask them legitimate questions about why they murdered someone, then you're not understanding the gravity of what an injustice this was. I didn't do this for any sort of professional or monetary gain. I didn't do this to get an exclusive interview with Karen Read. I did this because I was outraged and couldn't remain silent. I am fine with whatever happens from this point on. I will continue to do my show and make public speaking appearances, talking about my coverage of the story. If and when Karen Read is up for it, I'd be happy to sit down with her for an interview. But for now, I just hope that she does what is best for her and her family, as will I. Thanks, guys.